Hello, everybody. My name is David Carney. I'm the Executive Director of the Career Industry Council of Australia. Welcome to our second of our Lunchtime Snapshot Research Series webinars. Just before we get underway today, I'd just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, the Career Industry Council of Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this particular session on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining this session today. I'd now like to pass over to Dr. Elizabeth Knight, who is one of Seeker's research advisors, to host this particular session. Thanks, Lizzie.
Thanks, David. And it's just a delightful afternoon to be here again for the Research Snapshot, the second in the series, and in this wonderful National Careers Week. And we're just delighted to be able to present you with some really important snapshots of research that are going on in Australia that have real impact for career development and career practitioners, and this is just such a one. And so we've asked today Kira Clark from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence to talk about AgFutures, which is a design and delivery of a place-based skill pathway, and she's going to tell you all about it. But I think what's really interesting is the Brotherhood of St Lawrence's research methods, its concentration on youth, and I think there's some really interesting things we can pick up about working with young people outside cities and in general. So I'm going to hand over to Kira, and then I'm going to facilitate some questions at the end. Over to you, Kira.
Thanks, Lizzie, and thanks, David. Appreciate the invitation from Seeker to share the AgFutures work this week as part of National Careers Week. As Lizzie mentioned, I'm from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence in our Social Policy and Research Centre, and looking forward to sharing some of this work with you that we've been doing over a number of years, and to sharing some of the early and interim findings from this work. It's a collaborative systemic change piece in place. I'd like to acknowledge country. I'm in Naarm, on Wurundjeri country, and pay my respect to elders past and present. But this piece of work is in collaboration with partners right across the southwest of Victoria. So also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various towns and cities in this regional area that we're working in, particularly the Eastern Maar people over towards Warrnambool that we're working closely with our partners down there in Warrnambool, Portland, and also further north in Hamilton as well. So a short lunchtime snapshot today. I want to take you through a few things around AgFutures, a little bit of a background and overview of what the AgFutures initiative is, how we've built this partnership in place, particularly focused on working in close partnership with employers and with young people to make sure that their voices are central to the design and delivery of this initiative. What we've learnt through partnership, working with employers and young people, and to share with you the co-design model that has emerged from that collaborative work over the last couple of years. And we're now at the pointy end, about to deliver our first pilot of this initiative with a number of young people and host employers across the Barwon South West region here in Victoria. And then to finish off by looking ahead at what are some of the systemic lessons coming through, and what do we hope to learn through further testing and refining of the model over the next 12 months. So what is AgFutures? It's a community-led partnership, and as Lizzie alluded to, at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, as the lead partner and the facilitating partner of the initiative, we use a systemic change methodology. So this is moving through iterative rounds of learning, developmental evaluation, monitoring, to engage in innovation and system redesign work. We're really fortunate in this initiative to have both some local partners with deep expertise in place in the Barwon South West region, and also partners at the state and national level. So in place, we're working with Southwest TAFE, with Food and Fibre Great South Coast, and with Brophy Family and Youth Services, who are a youth specialist organisation working for many, many years in the region. And at the state and national level, we've got Dairy Australia, the RDC for the dairy industry, Skills Impact, now transitioning to Skills Insight, the Jobs and Skills Council for the agricultural sector, and of course, the Brotherhood of St Lawrence as well as part of that partnership. So bringing top-down and bottom-up expertise, which we've seen is really necessary to make sure that we've got the the 360 view of both the problem and potential solutions. So coming together as a partnership over many years, we're trying to tackle a number of challenges and the intersection of those challenges. So employers across the region that we're speaking to have confirmed what we've seen in a lot of the reviews and literature over the last couple of decades, that there's a real skills shortage and labour shortage approaching crisis in this region. It's not unique to this region. It's something experienced by agricultural employers right across the country. It was intensified by the closure of borders experienced during the lockdowns of the pandemic, but certainly was something predating the pandemic in terms of a crisis and shortage. In addition to the shortages and impacts facing employers, this is also a region emblematic of long-term challenges for young people seeking employment. So while the general unemployment rate has gone down and youth unemployment remains above but has gone down from the peak of the pandemic, there is a long-term problem of youth underemployment, which is impacted by geographic isolation, issues with housing. There's very low rental availability in this region, as there is in many regional areas across the country, and barriers to transport and access to the type of support systems that enable young people to embark on education, training, and entry-level employment. So as part of trying to address these two related issues of labour market and skill shortage and underemployment amongst young people, we're also looking at how we strengthen the role of skills and training, particularly employment-based training, to support transition of young people who have maybe fallen through the cracks, have either left school early or haven't transitioned into post-school education and training, how we can use new forms of employment-based training to fill that gap and to create opportunities for them to explore and then choose different career opportunities within the agricultural sector. Despite a lot of focus on apprenticeships and traineeships as a key policy mechanism to support entry-level employment, we know that there's still a small number of people in training who use employment-based training through apprenticeships and traineeships. Promisingly, the rates are slightly higher in the agricultural sector than the general, 16.7% use of apprenticeships and traineeships within the sector already. So AgFutures is looking to capitalise on some of that valuing and recognition of employment-based training as a key pathway in, and to look at how we can design that model in partnership with employers and young people to strengthen its efficacy and ensure that it's fit for purpose for this particular region, but also that there's a model there that can be adapted to other regions. Making sure that what we're doing in place with our partners in the Barwon South West isn't just another flash in the pan pilot, but really has some sustainability and legs to endure as a model. We've got funding through the Victorian Department of Education and Training, through the Workforce Training Innovation Fund, for 2 years of an applied research running alongside this partnership to ensure that we're building evidence, documenting and adapting the model in real time to get to a point where it can be sustained and has real local ownership. And that's some of the emerging findings from that research that I want to share with you all today. So a really big part of what's working well and the lessons that we're able to identify in the work so far has come from a long lead in time. So the AgFutures work really began back in September 2021 when we ran a national system design workshop process. We did 3 months of consultation with agricultural employers, with training providers, with big scope for agricultural entry-level training, with peak industry bodies, with careers advisors and careers education experts, and with young people themselves to understand what's the nature of the barrier here that's seen less and less young people actually engage in education and training for agriculture and has contributed to this gap and labour shortage and skill shortage in entry-level work. We combined the lessons coming out of that system design process with looking at some of the stats and really trying to get a handle on what are the trends and patterns nationally, but more importantly, what were the trends and patterns in this Barwon South West region. We've seen a downward trend in young people taking up entry-level training at Certificate 2 and Certificate 3 level in agriculture, in horticulture, and some of the other parallel and adjacent qualifications in things like land conservation, forestry, abattoir studies, where we see a shared foundational set of units of competency. We've seen increasing numbers of young people take up partial study in agriculture through vet delivered to secondary students as part of their senior secondary study, but we're still seeing low full completion rates and low rates of conversion of training into secure, decent and ongoing employment. So building on those learnings, we engaged in a long piece of co-design in community, in partnership with the TAFE, with industry and employers, to really try and get to a nuanced understanding of what some of the barriers were. There was an appetite for building a new bespoke fit for purpose employment-based training model, looking at ongoing needs analysis work. What were young farm workers who'd already transitioned into work telling us were sort of the key skills and capabilities that made a difference to them transitioning into work and really building their own capability for career mobility? And what sort of things were employers saying to us were needed to support a young person going from no background in farming to being safe and capable to work on farm in a short space of time with wraparound supports? We use this co-design to apply for that funding and have been awarded that 2 years of funding to support this ongoing innovation in place. So we knew that it wasn't enough just to listen to employers and young people at particular points in time, but that a key part of the success of this kind of place-based initiative and its potential sustainability was going to be about building mechanisms to ensure that young people and employers had an ongoing say in not just the initial design, but the ongoing revision and implementation. So we've been really fortunate in AgFutures to have both a youth reference group and an employer reference group that have been meeting regularly throughout the last several months, in which these local voices are feeding in critical voices saying, you know, what's not going to work, what are non-negotiables, and what needs to be in place to ensure that this is working for both those young people coming in, but also for the employers looking for skilled workers and wanting to develop the next generation of agricultural careers. So we've got a fantastic group of young people, many of whom are already working in the sector and have been sharing their insights. What made a difference for them when it came to starting their own agricultural on-farm careers, and what made the difference in the pre-employment support, those first crucial months, what made the difference in how their employers supported them, and what do they see as necessary within that initial skill set. There have been 4 really important things that have come out of this work with the young people coming off farm. First has been around tailoring options. For those of you not familiar with the Barwon South West region of Victoria, it feels like a big region to us here in Victoria. I know comparatively to some other states and areas, it probably seems quite a compact area, but the geographic distances for young people who may not have access to a car, might not have their driver's license, those distances can seem really big. So we've received a lot of feedback and support to design a pre-employment offer that ensures it meets young people where they're at and really limiting the expectation that they're having to travel all over the region to access the support and pre-employment program they need. How do we make it available in their hometown? How do we make it available in a hybrid format? Building opportunities to work and learn alongside to ensure that young people are combining that classroom time, the accredited training with opportunities for work shadow and being on farm has been consistently identified by employers and young people as a non-negotiable, as has the flexibility of when young people move into full-time work. We've heard loud and clear from our young farm workers and our farm managers that taking a young person with no prior work experience, no experience on farm, and putting them into full-time work straight away is a recipe for disaster. So there's been a really interesting period of co-design with our employers, looking at how we stage out that entry into work and how we build up their experience, their resilience for full-time work. And some of that's also focused on how we actually build in awareness of how to fuel your body, nutrition and well-being for building up to full-time employment, and how we work with employers for them to have some understanding and wiggle room in their rostering to know that young people might take a little while to get to that point of being ready for full-time work. This is also related to the issue of adapting the sort of supports that we provide for both young people and employers. And I'll talk through a little bit about what that wraparound support's looking like in a moment. So in addition to that feedback that's come through in the co-design from employers and young people about the model itself, we've been hearing a lot and listening really carefully around what are the particular bundle of skills and capabilities needed to set young people up for that first 6 months on farm. We're not looking at a full Cert 2 qualification up front here. We're looking at how do we pull out the bespoke bundle of skills and capabilities that are needed for safety, which has been a really big one that's come through, as you can see on the slide there. What's the broad foundational base that's not going to lock young people into a particular type of livestock? Even though they're placed on dairy farms, beef farms, and sheep and wool farms, we don't want to lock them into only being applicable to those sorts of environments. But we've really tried to design something that's foundational to keep a range of different livestock and agricultural career pathways open. You can see on the right-hand side of the text there at the top, a big part of this has been looking at how we stage out the delivery of the skills aligned with what farmers and young farmers have told us is the sort of progression that a young farmer might take as they begin over month 2, 3, 4, and up to month 6, and really thought about how we stage out and schedule the development of skills. And of course, you can see there again, consistently how we deliver these skills in a model that enables learning and application side by side. So building on the idea of the model and the skills, another big takeaway from the learning has been the idea of transferability of the skills and capabilities. And there have been 3 main concerns that have come through in the feedback leading up to the application for funding and since we've kicked off this project in the region. The first has been feedback about the narrowness of the entry-level training, and this is related to why we've tried to keep that foundation open to a broad range of post-pilot opportunities. The risk of young people making decision without sufficient time on farm to experience, work shadow and understand what they're getting themselves into and what the opportunities long term might be, and the lack of visibility beyond the entry level. I don't know if anyone who's joining us today has ever done milking or done 5 a.m. farm work, but it's been a really consistent message coming through from our reference groups that selling young people who are looking for a career 5 a.m. milking as sort of the end point is a hard sell. So a big part of what we've had to do with young people and employers in the region is look at those visibility opportunities, what comes beyond that first entry point, and what are the multiple different specialisations that young people might be able to move into if after 6 months they decide, I love a life on the farm, I think this could be for me. So part of making sure that at the training side of things, we're keeping those options open is we've mapped the units that have been selected and identified as part of our skills bundle across a range of different parallel qualifications. We've done this for a couple of reasons, but the main one has been that we know that for some young people who come into AgFutures, after 6 months, they may decide being on a farm is not for me, but I'm still interested in pursuing something in the general agriculture and horticulture sector. How can I take what I've already learnt and not go back to square one, but build on that to move either sideways or diagonally into another related sector, agribusiness, retail agriculture, into food processing, horticulture, land conservation, or something similar. We've really tried to keep as many of those parallel and diagonal pathways open as possible, knowing that after 6 months, it's not going to be for everyone. So through all that work, getting the insights on the model, getting the insights on the particular collection of skills, and looking at how we map the model and skills to a broader range of pathways post-pilot, this is the model that we've arrived at, that we're about to start piloting now. It starts with up to 6 weeks of pre-employment program run by a collection of Learn Locals and youth employment specialists focusing on nutrition, well-being, work readiness, and a lot of time work shadowing and on-farm as well before they hit the accredited training. The accredited training is being delivered at South West TAFE's Glen Ormiston campus, which is their fit-for-purpose agricultural campus, 3 days a week, with the remaining 2 days of the week dedicated to work shadowing, time on farm, and some on-farm induction and partnership work with their host employer. After this, they'll do 6 months paid employment on farm. And as I mentioned earlier, this will include sort of staggering and staging out their entry week so that they don't do full-time week 1, with a dedicated support worker, a youth employment and engagement officer who's working with the young person and the employer, checking in weekly to make sure the support is there to help them develop their relationship and to spot any additional needs supports that might be helpful as the young person continues. At the end of the 6 months, our hope is that as many of the young people as possible will continue on and have discovered a love for the agricultural sector, but we know that's not going to be true for everyone. So we've got an additional 6 months of support after the initial 6-month placement to look at how we can support those young people either to transition into ongoing training with their employer to complete their certificate, to go into an apprenticeship or traineeship, to move sideways to continue training in a parallel certificate, to move to another employer if the employer fit hasn't been quite right, or if they decide they never want to see a cow or a farm again and want to transition into something as well. We've got 6 months to support them to identify other opportunities that line up with their aspirations and what they're looking for. So this is just a little bit more detail about that model stepped out over time. We're running an evaluation and monitoring right alongside this to ensure that we're listening to the experience of the young people and employers right along. Young people will return after 4 months on farm to do their block release at TAFE, to fill out their logbooks and to do their assessment related to a couple of the vehicle units. We're also going to use this as an opportunity to do some capability building with employers, particularly related to mental health first aid for young people. This again has been a bit of a non-negotiable coming through from our reference groups, that it's not just about building the capability of young people for their careers, but also looking at how we build capability for ongoing support and mentoring within these workplaces and within the local employer network. So we're just approaching the 12-month mark of our funding for this initiative. We've completed the initial co-design, looking at the model and the delivery. We're now at that really exciting point of seeing if all our assumptions, all our investment, all our design work is paying off with a model that works for young people and employers. We're onboarding our host employers and young people at the moment, and looking forward to them starting their training with South West TAFE at the beginning of July. And then we're looking forward to, as we roll out each of the cohorts across the next 6 to 8 months, taking gaps in between each cohort rollout to look into the evaluation data and make the tweaks. It might be that 1 or 2 of the units of competency that have been selected aren't really fit for purpose for the full breadth of employers that we've got. They might work for dairy, might not work for beef. It's these kind of lessons that we're looking forward to rolling with and building back into the redesign. At the end, we'll be publishing a practice guide and a set of resources to support co-design, a handbook for employers and a handbook for young people that have been designed by the employers and young people themselves through those reference groups, and publishing a final evaluation. Our interim evaluation from phase 1 is going live on our AgFutures website later this week. So look forward to being able to share that with people as well. We have a newsletter and a website if anyone's interested in learning more. But Lizzie, I'll wrap up there and happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kira. I really enjoyed that, not just because of the fabulous photos you had all the way through. I'm just thinking about this and listening to it as a career practitioner, and I just thought there were some really great insights about, authentic work experience, understanding what roles are like. I'm really aware that in Australia, one of our Australian national career interest tests includes outdoor as a different interest. And do you have any observations that you could sort of feed back to career practitioners of, young people who seem to be interested in the scheme? And I know a colleague's question about how people can get onto the scheme. Do they have particular thematic interests or things like that?
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. Really useful question. So not enough time to go into it in a lot of detail, but the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, who has historically run things like transition to work and youth part support programs, we have an advantage thinking methodology for working with young people that is very much focused on beginning with young people's reflection of their own attributes, their own aspirations, their own things that they enjoy as the first point of contact. So the employment service providers that we're working with in referrals here, really starting with, the realities of what it might be like to work on a farm. So things like, do you enjoy working outdoors? How do you think you'd go working first thing in the morning? How do you think you'd go working around animals? And it's actually one of the first tests that all of the employers tell us about when thinking about whether a young person would be a good match. Is that young person going to be safe around the animals? And are the animals going to be safe around young people? A lot of employers say they can tell within the first couple of minutes in the way a young person interacts with animals. So a big part of that exposure and experience up front before young people sign up, taking them out on farm, getting them exposed first. We've listened loud and clear that that's really crucial, that we don't sign anyone up who's really going to turn around and it's not going to be a good experience for them or the animals or the employer.
No, that sounds brilliant. Thanks, Kieran. And we're obviously always interested in that advantage thinking approach. And so that would be a great thing to hear about. So can I just ask what's next in terms of your suggestion? This is a national webinar. Obviously, we're both in Victoria, I'm in Wollongong. But what would you say for practitioners around the country looking out for this or other accredited programs?
Yeah, thanks, Lily. So this work has emerged from something called the National Youth Employment Body, which is a national partnership of 9 different communities. Warrnambool Moyne is one of them, but really one of the opportunities through the National Youth Employment Body, which is looking at how we enable place-based leadership, careers, skills and training, social infrastructure and employment to support young people into secure and decent work. One of the sort of the functions of the National Youth Employment Body is how we cross-pollinate. So the early lessons coming out of this work in Warrnambool Moyne are now being adapted and trialled in Shoalhaven in the agricultural sector. They're being trialled in Adelaide in civil construction. So using the same model, the idea of how do you work with employers and young people in ongoing reference groups? How do you look at new forms of employment-based training? We're now looking at testing them in other regions in ag, but also in other sectors. Up in the Logan area of Brisbane, the model is being adapted into the construction sector and into the care sector in the Eurobodalla region of New South Wales as well. So anyone interested in sort of learning a little bit more about how it's being adapted in other regions and places should either get in touch with us via our website and email, or go online and look at the National Youth Employment Body website as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Kira. And I've also got a question for Grace in the Q&A about how are you promoting it in schools, but I think also how can people kind of refer people to it? Is there anything you'd say about that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Grace. So our target population of young people for this initiative are young people aged 17 to 25. Mm-hmm. So because one of the key challenges we're trying to address are those young people who've fallen through the cracks in the transition from school to work, we're primarily working with the employment service providers to look at young people who are already on caseload, who are unemployed, and looking for opportunities for supported entry into work. Not surprisingly, we've had a lot of interest coming from young people who are in year 11 in the region, who either from their parents or from the careers advisors at school, who are aware that those young people have one foot out the door. So we are engaging with the local learning and employment network here in the region in Victoria, and looking at how the model can be adapted to support those young people, some of whom have already done partial Cert 2 while at school, and looking at a later skill set maybe being at the Cert 3 level to create a pathway for them. We're working closely with the Careers Advisor Network in Southwest Victoria, the youth engagement officers at all the Shire councils, and with the Department of Education and the Senior Secondary Advisory Group down here. It is one of the joys of this place-based work that you have such a tight-knit and very well-connected group, a network. Everyone knows everyone and what's happening. So working in a long place, this kind of place and community over time, we've got really lovely investment and constant referrals. Have you chatted to so-and-so? So yeah, that's sort of how the word of mouth has been growing. And that's where we're starting to get the calls from parents and young people interested. So it's really great to see.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Kira. It's been a great lunchtime session, and I think just enough to whet people's appetites to find out more, but also some real ongoing lessons that can really be recontextualized back into people's practice. So thanks so much for coming along to one of our snapshots, and we wish you all the best with the next stages of the project.
Thanks so much for having me.